In this lesson, we'll learn about the Spot Healing Brush tool in Photoshop. So the Spot Healing Brush is a great tool to use if you're wanting to seamlessly remove any unflattering blemishes on a person's skin. In this case, this person's face here, he has some pimples scattered across his cheeks, some here on his nose. We're going to talk about how we can use the Spot Healing Brush to seamlessly remove some of these blemishes. So the Spot Healing Brush is located right here in your tool panel. It's the first of several healing tools that we'll be learning about and demonstrating in the forthcoming lessons. So the keyboard shortcut to jump to this tool is J. If you click and hold on that tool, you can see some of those additional healing tools that we'll be learning about coming up. Now, additionally, you can hold down Shift and hit J to cycle through those different healing tools. So let's go ahead and zoom in here, hitting Control equals on our keyboard again. We can see these different blemishes that we'd like to start removing. Now, when you're working on a project like this, it's important to work non-destructively. So if you look at our Layers panel over here to the screen right, you can see we have the background layer containing the image that we're currently looking at. So if I were to use this tool, come in here and make a lot of edits, save the file, close out of Photoshop, I open the file at a later time, there'd be no undoing those changes because I would have made them all to this background layer, to the original image. So what I want to do is create a new layer, hitting this new sheet button here at the bottom of our Layers panel, and I'm going to have those edits be applied to that layer using my Spot Healing Brush. Now, with the Spot Healing Brush, you're sampling pixels, okay? And if I want all that sampled information to be applied to this layer, I want to make sure I have Sample All Layers checkmarked here in our Options panel. This allows us to sample from all visible layers in our Layers panel. So the way this tool works, you find a blemish like this little one right here. You basically paint a selection over it, and like magic, it's gone. Okay, here's another one right here. Paint a little selection over it, release, and it's gone. So how is this working? Well, let's go back up to the Options panel. And by default, for the Spot Healing Brush, it'll be set to Content Aware here in Photoshop CC. So this compares nearby image content to seamlessly fill in that selection that you paint, realistically maintaining a lot of key details such as shadows and object edges. Basically, it's maintaining tonal and color information. Okay. You also have these other two options here, Proximity Match and Create Texture. You could try these other two options if you're not quite getting the best visual result that you intend. Proximity Match basically uses pixels around the edge of the selection that you paint, okay, to find an area to use as a patch. And then Create Texture right here uses pixels in the selection to create a texture. And I'll sometimes use this one if I'm wanting to kind of smooth out specific areas. Perhaps I've done a lot of healing. That might be a good option to use. But more often than not, I would recommend just leaving it to Content Aware, especially for something like this. I think you'll be fine. So again, just painting selections here and there, and you can see how it's very easily removing those different little blemishes. So again, as you paint a selection, it's sampling from pixels surrounding that selection, okay? And it's weaving them in, weaving pixels into that selection while maintaining tonal and color information. It's not like the clone stamp, which we'll talk about later, that just makes a direct copy from a specific area that you source, okay? Okay, this is basically looking at where you're selecting it and the surrounding area. So I'm just kind of healing a few additional areas here. Now, let's look at this one right here. I've been kind of saving it, this little blemish. This is a good one to demonstrate some blend modes. So you see where it says Mode, click where it says Normal. We have a few blend modes that are pretty much the same as if you were to look at those same blend modes over here for your Layers panel. So if you ever use blend modes, you'll have a little bit of an understanding. But how about we choose Lighten? And we paint a selection over that right there. So what that did is as we healed that area, it's healing predominantly the darker area that we had there, but the lighter area of that pimple is still very much relevant. So just taking a step back, hitting Control Z. So we could also try Darken. We'll kind of get the opposite reaction, I'm sure. So it's we're still left with a lot of that darker area, but it's the lighter area that's being predominantly healed. I think a good spot to really demonstrate this, we'll go and zoom in just a little bit more, is kind of right here where we have these little skin pores, little dots right here under the eye. If you wanted to kind of lessen the intensity of them, I think using the darken blend mode might be a good one to try out and kind of experiment and see kind of what visual results that yields you. Again, we can toggle the visibility of the layer that we're working on and kind of see how that looks. I'll go ahead and switch back to normal here, and I'll go ahead and heal that area right there. Now, you can also increase or decrease the size of your brush just hitting the bracket keys on your keyboard. You can also right-click, bringing up this dialog here to adjust your brush size. You can also adjust the hardness if you want. I like to leave the hardness down pretty low so that it's a softer brush. It makes for just some nice blending when you're healing areas like this. You can also adjust the spacing, the angle of the brush if need be. And then also, this is set to pen pressure, which in this case, I want that to be because I'm using a Wacom stylus, but you could turn it off, okay? But I want it to pen pressure, which allows me to dictate the size of that selection based off of how much pressure I apply, okay? But already you can see what a huge difference we've made. Now, in our next lesson, we'll go ahead and come back with a different healing tool to demonstrate on these remaining blemishes. But it's important to note that as we go through these different healing tools in the coming lessons, that you don't have to think of them as only being used for skin or on a person. You can use them on a lot of different types of images. So here's an outdoor shot of a city skyline. And so right here, if you look closely, we have some little spots on the sky. This was probably a result of water or dirt being on the camera lens when the image was taken. So I'm just increasing the size of my brush with my bracket tool there on my bracket button on my keyboard. And you can see how we can very easily remove those spots. Now in this case, I applied that directly to the background layer. And that would probably be fine. But again, if you want to work completely non-destructively, it's good measure to practice that. I would make a new layer. Again, making sure you have sample all layers and removing that information. Okay? And you can kind of make that comparison. Right? Very nice. So later on, we will revisit this image and we'll talk about how we could use another healing tool to remove these people down here by the shoreline, removing them seamlessly. Okay? So in our next lesson, we'll continue on with another healing tool. We'll be talking about the healing brush tool. So stick around. We'll see you then.